Hello and a very good evening. You're watching the news at 6 on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Here are the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to arrive in Tel Aviv in a short while from now, addressed to the media and a dinner hosted by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to precede a day of high-level meetings tomorrow. Supreme Court gives Centre and RBI 2 weeks to come up with plan to address demonetization concerns. Court says requests of those who had genuine difficulties in exchanging old currency must be considered. Encounter ends in Jammu and Kashmir. Body of the third terrorist recovered after a gun battle that lasts over 24 hours. 2 army personnel sustained minor injuries during the operation in the Palabama area of Palabama district. Protests outside Chinese embassy in New Delhi after Beijing stops Indian pilgrims from visiting Kailash Mansarovar. Protesters urge public to ban Chinese products. And on American Independence Day, North Korea launches its first intercontinental ballistic missile that it claims can land anywhere in the world. South Korea says it's maintaining military readiness against the irresponsible provocation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will arrive at the Israeli financial center Tel Aviv in a short while from now. On the first evening of his visit, he will visit the Danziger Dan flower farm, which is one of Israel's leading floriculture companies in Tel Aviv. He will also visit the Yad Vashem Memorial in Jerusalem that is dedicated to the victims of the Holocaust. Before closing the day Wednesday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address the media briefly and will join a private dinner hosted by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Official engagements and summit-level talks between the two prime ministers will take place tomorrow. This is the first ever visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Israel and is aimed at commemorating 25 years of establishing diplomatic ties between the two countries.
We know that Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu have believed strongly in the personal dimension that can exist between two leaders, and I think that that's going to be play to some extent a role publicly and politically in the way this visit has been designed. The visit is taking place in the context of the 25 years of the Hindu-Israeli relations, and its aim of setting the roadmap towards building the partnership for the next 25 years.
Well, the Supreme Court today granted the Centre and the Reserve Bank of India 2 weeks to consider the option of allowing people to deposit their demonetized notes. A bench comprising Chief Justice J.S. Keher and Justice D.Y. Chandrachud asked Solicitor General and the Centre's representative Ranjit Kumar to take instructions on the issue. The bench was hearing a batch of petitions and was of the opinion that the people who have a compelling reason for not depositing the old 500 and 1,000 rupee notes should be allowed to do so. The Solicitor General then sought time to seek instructions for granting an opportunity to persons to deposit their money in a case-by-case basis. Prime Minister Modi had on November 8th last year announced that 500 and 1,000 rupees currency notes would be no longer legal tender. People were given time until March 31st to deposit the money at RBI branches after complying with certain formalities. Well, the encounter in Palabama that started on Monday ended today. The body of the third terrorist who was killed in the encounter that started yesterday was recovered today. The gun battle started yesterday after security forces launched a search operation following a tip-off about the presence of terrorists in the Bamnu area of Palabama. 2 terrorists were killed yesterday. Combing operations were suspended today. 2 army personnel sustained minor injuries during the operation. Let's now get to the latest on the India-China diplomatic row. Scores of protesters held a demonstration in New Delhi to protest China's decision to block the entry of Indian pilgrims to Kailash Mansarovar in Tibet. China had last week suspended the annual Hindu pilgrimage at the Nathula Pass, which lies on the frontier between Sikkim and Tibet. This was in response to alleged intrusion of Indian troops into its territory. Protesters gathered outside the Chinese embassy in the national capital and burnt photographs of the Chinese president. They also urged people to boycott use of Chinese goods.
पिछले कुछ दिनों पहले आपने देखा कि चाइना ने भारत के नागरिकों को एक मानसरोवर यात्रा से रोका। उसके बाद उन्होंने हमारी सीमा रेखा के अंदर आकर हमारे सैनिकों के साथ दुर्व्यवहार किया। हम उसको चेताना चाहते हैं कि अब भारत आपकी जो बर्बरता है ये नहीं सहेगा।
I request all of our Indian friends or Indian citizens that please boycott Chinese good and please use Indian made products because the product we are buying from China is misusing that money.
China said it would not allow pilgrims from India to visit Kailash Mansarovar if the situation was not resolved. India has refused to cow down to the threats, saying that the dispute began when China removed an old Indian bunker. Meanwhile, reports claim that the Indian and Chinese soldiers have dug into positions and pitched tents in anticipation of prolonged confrontation near the Sikkim-Bhutan-Tibet tri-junction. Reports also claim that the Navy is closely monitoring an unusual surge in the number of Chinese warships in the Indian Ocean region. Well, the situation in Darjeeling remained tense as the agitation for a separate Gorkha land entered its 20th day today. Internet services remain suspended for the 17th day in a row as Darjeeling extended the strike for 8 more days on Monday, except for pharmacies. Shops, restaurants, hotels, schools and colleges remained closed. Boarding schools also extended their vacation due to the ongoing unrest in the hills. The Gorkha Janmukti Morcha is taking out rallies in various parts of the hills in support of its demand for a separate Gorkha land. It demanded that the centre initiate a dialogue on Gorkha land, which it said is the aspiration of the local residents. They also said that the Mamata Banerjee government is dealing with it as a law and order problem when it demands a political solution.
I feel amazed at, Gautam Dev when he says there are no human rights here and all. I think this is a part of human rights, We're entitled, it's a democratic right. It's a freedom of speech and expression. We express our feelings, we express our opinions through the media, through the net, through WhatsApp, through Facebook. Now, I don't know how, a government that claims to be democratic, can do such a thing. An administration can, deprive us of a right to freedom of expression that is guaranteed in the Constitution.
On a nationwide tour ahead of the presidential elections later this month, NDA's candidate Ram Nath Kovind met leaders of the TRS in Hyderabad. Kovind assured the legislators that the office of the president was above party politics and he would strive to uphold the constitution. Kovind also said that although he was a member of the BJP earlier, he should not be seen as any particular party's candidate. Kovind was accompanied by Union Ministers M. Venkaiah Naidu, Bandaru Dattatreya and other BJP leaders. The TRS is not an ally of the NDA but has declared support to Kovind's candidature. Achal Kumar Jyoti is all set to be the next Chief Election Commissioner of India. The Law Ministry announced Jyoti's appointment on Tuesday and said he will take charge as the CEC on July 6th when incumbent Naseem Zaidi retires. An IAS officer of 1975 batch from Gujarat cadre, 64-year-old Jyoti, had served as Chief Secretary of Gujarat during Narendra Modi's tenure as Chief Minister. The Chief Election Commissioner heads the Election Commission of India and has tenure of 6 years in office or till he or she attains the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. As CEC of India, Jyoti will be overseeing state assembly elections in Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh before demitting office in January 2018. The Election Commission on Tuesday issued a notification for the upcoming vice presidential election. The election for the post of vice president is scheduled to be held on August 5th. The last date for filing nominations is July 18th, while the last date for withdrawal of candidature is July 21st. Neither the ruling NDA nor the opposition has so far announced their respective candidates for the post. The term of Vice President Mohammad Hamid Ansari, who held the post for 2 terms in a row, is coming to an end on August 10th. For the vice presidential election, a candidate needs 20 proposers and 20 seconders who should be members of parliament. Vice President Mohammad Hamid Ansari on Tuesday met Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam, Pham Binh Minh. Minh, along with his delegation, was accorded a ceremonial welcome at the Vice President's house. Both leaders discussed strategic and bilateral issues at the meeting. Minh who is also the Foreign Minister of Vietnam, met his counterpart Sushma Swaraj. The two leaders discussed mutual and regional issues at the meeting. Well, here's a roundup of the other news from across the country and nationwide. The Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly meetings came to an untimely halt today after MLAs clashed over the implementation of GST in the state. MLAs from the Congress and National Conference opposed the implementation of the new tax regime. Police had earlier detained several traders after they tried to march towards the State Assembly to protest the implementation of GST in its present form. Over 200 senior central government officers will monitor district-level implementation of goods and services tax with a focus on resolving difficulties faced by consumers. The government has clubbed each district of the country in 166 clusters, aligning them with the administrative divisions of the Central Revenue Department. The officers have been asked to monitor availability of essential commodities and retail price trends. The Supreme Court has issued a new order which allows liquor shops to function within 500 meters of a national highway if the state chooses to denotify the route. It observed that the purpose of its judgment was to ensure that drivers under the influence of alcohol do not get on to high-speed national highways. The move will benefit numerous bars in cities such as Bengaluru, where vast stretches of important thoroughfares totaling 78 kilometers are actually parts of 6 national highways. It's time for a short break now, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
I think they're ready to surrender.
आईएनए की बागी फौजियों पर अंग्रेज देशद्रोह का मुकदमा चलाएंगे।
उन तीनों के बचने के चांसेस कम हैं।
ये कोई आम केस नहीं, कोर्ट मार्शल है। बोला भाई, एक केस आप कांग्रेस के लिए नहीं, सुभाष बोस के लिए लड़ी।
Lieutenant Gulbaksh Singh Dhillon, Captain Shah Nawaz Khan, Captain P.K. Sehgal. Section 41, waging war against the king. You are charged with murder. Do you plead guilty to the charges read out?
ईमानदारी से आजादी के लिए लड़ने वाली अगर कोई फौज है तो उसका नाम है आजाद हिंद फौज।
The safety, honor and welfare of your country comes first, always.
British Indian Army hand you over to the Japanese Imperial Army.
हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया।
इस बार कुछ ऊपर नीचे हुआ तो देश में बवाल मच जाए। अब जनता किसी अंग्रेज को नहीं छोड़ेगी।
रात दिन अपने सीने विच वजदी आजादी दे राग नू बंद कर ला।
अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं?
आज हिंदुस्तानी फौज के पास अपना असली मकसद है, हिंदुस्तान की आजादी।
तुम मुझे खून दो, मैं तुम्हें आजादी दूंगा।
ये मुकदमा पूरी इंडियन नेशनल आर्मी का है।
क्योंकि हमने वो दिन देखा है जब हमें ऐसा लगा था कि हमने हिंदुस्तान को वाकई आजाद कर दिया।
देश की आजादी की लड़ाई कोर्ट में लड़ी जा रही है और इस वक्त पूरा देश एक साथ तैनात है।
This trial and its judgment shall be remembered throughout history.
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, North Korea said on Tuesday that it had successfully tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile. South Korea, Japan and China condemned the launch that came as Americans prepared to mark their Independence Day, triggering a Twitter outburst from President Donald Trump. Here's a report.
North Korea claimed it successfully tested its first long-range intercontinental missile that it says can reach anywhere in the world. Called the Hwasong-14 on state TV, Tuesday morning's missile reached a height above 2,500 kilometers. Taking off from the Bangyeon airfield in the town of Kusong, it flew 578 miles before landing in the sea between North Korea and Japan.
동지의 전략적 결단에 따라 조선민주주의인민공화국 국방과학원 과학자 기술자들은 새로 연구 개발한 대륙간 탄도로켓 화성 14형 시험 발사를 성공적으로 진행하였다.
South Korea strongly condemned what it called an irresponsible provocation, saying it is maintaining military readiness for a possible further provocation by North Korea.
오전 9시 40분경 평안북도 방현 일대에서 동해상으로 불상 탄도미사일 한 발을 발사했습니다. 그는 북한의 추가 도발 가능성에 대비하여 만반의 대비 태세를 유지하고 있습니다.
If confirmed, the intercontinental ballistic missile could potentially have the range to reach the US mainland. The launch happened hours before Independence Day celebrations started in the United States, triggering a Twitter outburst from US President Donald Trump, who urged North Korea's neighbor China to end this nonsense once and for all. Japan strongly protested what it called a clear violation of UN resolutions. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he plans to ask China and Russia to play a more constructive role in dealing with North Korea and its weapons development program at this week's G20 summit in Germany.
北朝鮮がまたもや弾道ミサイルの発射を強行しました。度重なる国際社会の警告を無視するものであります。日米韓の強い結束のもとに国際社会の圧力を強化してまいります。
China, North Korea's northern neighbor and one of the only countries in the region with diplomatic ties to Pyongyang, urged restraint after the launch. It also opposed North Korea's going against the clear rules set by the UN Security Council resolutions.
安理会有关决议对朝鲜利用弹道导弹技术进行发射活动有着明确的规定。中方反对朝鲜违反安理会的决议进行有关发射活动，敦促朝方不要再采取违反安理会决议的行动，为重启对话谈判创造必要的条件。
The United Nations has imposed multiple sets of sanctions on Pyongyang over its weapons program. North Korea, in its defense, says it needs nuclear arms to defend itself against the threat of invasion. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, energy-rich Qatar has announced plans to increase natural gas production by 30% over the next several years. The decision comes on the back of increased pressure from its neighbors in a diplomatic crisis. The emirate intends to raise production of natural gas a year to 100 million tons by 2024. The timing of the announcement is as much political as it is economic. Qatar had given its formal response to a list of demands made by its neighbors for lifting their sanctions. The proposed consequences include threat to sanction any international firm working with Qatar if it failed to meet their demands. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt and Bahrain severed ties with Qatar last month, accusing it of supporting terrorism. Doha denies the accusation. The four Arab states will next meet on Wednesday to discuss whether to end the crisis or impose further sanctions on Qatar.
لقد أعلنا في إبريل الماضي عن تطوير مشروع غاز جديد يخصص للتصدير في القطاع الجنوبي لحقل الشمال. وبعد إجراء مزيد من الدراسات الفنية فقد ارتأينا أن الخيار الأمثل هو مضاعفة حجم المشروع من 2 إلى 4 مليار قدم مكعب يوميا، وهذا يعتبر زيادة 20% من الإنتاج الحالي في حقل الشمال، أو ما يعادل 1,000,000 برميل مكافئ من النفط يوميا. وقد قررنا أن أفضل السبل لتطوير هذا المشروع الضخم هو تصديره كغاز مسال، وبذلك سنرفع الطاقة الإنتاجية للغاز المسال من 77 مليون طن سنويا إلى 100 مليون طن سنويا، وهو ما يشكل زيادة بنسبة 30%، وسيتم إنجاز هذا المشروع خلال 5 إلى 7 سنوات من الآن بإذن الله تعالى.
Well, staying on with international news now, France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, has proposed a radical change in the country's government. Speaking at the historic Palace of Versailles, Macron said he planned to cut the number of lawmakers by a third. The French president added that he has a broad mandate after sweeping wins in presidential and parliamentary elections this year. He further added that he would seek direct approval from voters in a referendum if Parliament failed to sign off his intended institutional reforms quickly enough. The proposed cuts would reduce the number of National Assembly members from 557 to 385 and the numbers of Senate members from 348 to 232.
Que nous laissons la France sans défense face au terrorisme et de l'autre que nous bradons nos libertés. Eh bien, rien de tout cela n'est vrai. Derrière tous ces faux procès, on trouve le même vice. Le vice qui empoisonne depuis trop longtemps le débat public.
Well, here's a roundup now of the other international news and global buzz. US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces breached the wall around Raqqa's old city. It marked a major advance in the weeks-old battle to drive Islamic State militants out of their self-declared capital. Sources said that both the IS and the YPG were currently pushing forward in the Hay al-Sina district. The fifth round of talks on ending the six-year Syrian conflict started in Kazakhstan today. The two-day peace talks sponsored by Russia, Iran and Turkey will focus on establishing 4 safe zones in the country. The meetings are set to involve bilateral talks before a plenary session bringing together all the participants. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker scolded the European Parliament members over meagre attendance at the plenary session. Members failed to turn up for an address by Malta's Prime Minister Joseph Muscat. Juncker said that they should show more respect for smaller members of the bloc. At least 56 people were killed and 22 others missing as heavy rains left a trail of destruction in 11 Chinese provinces. 27,000 houses collapsed while 37,000 others were damaged in floods, landslides and hailstorms in various parts. Rescue personnel in Yangjiang City, Guangdong province helped evacuate local residents from flooded homes. The Philippines Supreme Court endorsed President Rodrigo Duterte's enforcement of martial law across the southern part of the country. Meanwhile, militants continue to occupy parts of Marawi, the Islamic capital of the mainly Catholic country. Despite a US-backed military offensive, it has claimed more than 460 lives and displaced nearly 400,000 people. Moving on to some sports news. Now, India placed on top of the table in the ICC Women's World Cup 2017, having won all 3 matches in the tournament so far. They grabbed a convincing win against England before thumping West Indies and Pakistan. On Wednesday, the team will play Sri Lanka. However, captain Mithali Raj has cautioned against complacency, saying the fall of wickets at regular intervals could create immense pressure for the batters who have to come in next. Raj also said that the team's plan for Sri Lanka would depend on the pitch that they play on. Against Pakistan, even though the team did not post a huge total, the captain's plan to push the opponents on the back foot worked quite well. On Wednesday too, the plan is to get quick wickets if the pitch plays its part. Well, former cricket captain Ravi Shastri has formally applied for the job of Team India's coach. Shastri was the director of the team between 2014 and 2016. He had also applied for the job last year, losing out to Kumble in the end. Kumble resigned as coach of the Indian cricket team last week. 5 applications had so far approached the BCCI, which includes Dodda Ganesh, Lalchand Rajput, Virendra Sehwag, Richard Pybus and Tom Moody. The interviews will be conducted on the 10th of July by the Cricket Advisory Committee comprising Saurav Ganguly, VVS Lakshman and Sachin Tendulkar. Well, that's it on this newscast. Have a good evening.